Hey everyone, and welcome back to What's the Plan, the podcast where we dive into the matters of our careers in the architecture and urban planning field. I'm Hayley.
And I'm Andrea. So Hayley, what's the plan this week?
This week's plan is all about Downsizing, the film.
Since the birth of moving pictures, film and architecture have been intertwined. This intersection exists as both film and architecture are art forms of cultural expressions that address the human condition through a spatial narrative. And as a result, filmmaking cannot exist without an immersive built environment setting the scene.
That being said, as two cinephiles, we thought it would be fun to start a series of movie reviews and analyses. This is a series where Hayley and Andrea will separately watch the film, come up with our own analysis and questions about the film, come together to share our own opinions, and ask each other questions about the film.
So, warnings, spoilers ahead.
So today's episode, as we mentioned earlier, is about the film Downsizing that was released in 2017. Written and directed by Alexander Payne, best known for Sideways, The Descendants, and Nebraska, Downsizing is a satirical film about the environment, politics of privilege, culture, and the purpose of humanity. There's a lot that happens in the movie, so this is going to be a lengthy synopsis.
Before we are even introduced to the protagonist of the movie, the story begins with scientists in Norway discovering a method shrinking humans approximately 3,000 times to about 5 inches tall, like this big. Yeah, so it's tiny, yes. And they begin proponing this technology once human trials are completed in the creation of the first community of the small on an environmental grounds. So their reasoning is by shrinking people, the human footprint on the planet will be greatly diminished. And the community is small. They live inside a gas-permeable enclosure designed to protect people from the hazards of weather, especially bugs, because bugs are pretty much the same size as humans now. And they're in these terrarium-like glass boxes throughout all day, and they're used to transport them as well from place to place outside these enclosures. And the world is amazed by this new development. However, they're quite skeptical of this technology.
The film stars Matt Damon as Paul Safronic, an ordinary man who is overstretched in a world that is about to end. We learn at the beginning of the film that he initially enrolled in pre-med with the goal of becoming a surgeon, but had to drop out and move home to care for his ailing mother. Now he works as an occupational therapist at a food production factory with work that is stagnant. And he and his wife, Audrey, live in his childhood home that they're trying to move out of but can't afford to. This overall just wasn't the life that he had imagined for himself.
And much like the rest of the world, Paul was skeptical of the technology. Him and Audrey mostly ignored and continued on with their daily lives until they learned that their close friends became small themselves. And their friends actually had spoken the gospel or preached the benefits that is small living. And these consist of financial upside. Because you're small, not only do you as a person get smaller, but your wealth increases. So the conversion rate is of $1 equals approximately $80. And with an increase in wealth, there's also an improved lifestyle. You have the ability to buy a McMansion now. You can retire early and pursue hobbies. As well, obviously the environmental benefit. When humans consume less and produce less waste, and all around they see it as an overall benefit.
With that being said, and all the benefits that they hear, they make the decision to downsize and move to one of the small towns called Leisureland. Unfortunately for Paul, after he finishes his own process of downsizing, he hears from his wife Audrey that she no longer wishes to downsize and had stayed full size. When he wakes up from the operation, alone and wifeless, he now doubts the decisions that he makes, and the dreams of a better life has been dashed.
If his rude awakening to life as a small person was any clue, life in the small community isn't what it seems like. He ends up getting divorced, moving into an apartment, getting a customer service job to pass the time and earn some money, and life is just as mundane as it was before he was small. Until he encounters Ngoc Lan, a Vietnamese political activist who was just jailed and downsized against her will. She escaped in a television box, barely survived being shipped to the United States, and ended up getting her leg amputated. And as a result, he spends a lot of time with Ngoc Lan, and this woman exposes him to the very middle American kind of living situation that Paul and his perspectives have never encountered remotely before, and as a result, she changes his life forever. So, Hayley, what were your initial thoughts about the movie?
My initial thoughts of the movie. So before actually watching the movie, I thought this would be a quirky comedy, talking about how life would be so much better if we were rich, because as we were introduced to downsizing, that was one of the perks of downsizing. As you become smaller, as you mentioned, your wealth increases. But that definitely changed as the movie went on, and my initial thought is no longer like what I think the rest of the movie is like. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so just before I go into my initial thoughts, I want to say something.
Okay.
So, like, as evident by the series, I am a film lover. And being in Toronto, one of the major perks is is TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, also known as the People's Festival. So every year when the list of selected films comes out, I would go through every single one of them, read the synopsis, note down the ones I want to watch, and that's how I discovered the movie Downsizing. However, although I didn't end up getting tickets to watch it during the actual festival, I did actually watch this movie before. But, the movie, besides, the major plot lines, I actually recalled none of it. Okay. So my initial thoughts are not actually my initial thoughts, but actually a secondary initial thoughts.
Okay.
So, as a result, my thoughts were going into this movie was already colored, because I do recall that, he did go downsizing, and I do recall his wife leaving him, and him meeting Knockland. However, I didn't really, remember a lot of the minute, mundaneness or, things that actually happened in detailed. So my thoughts were initially was, a lot was happening in this movie, but I feel like at the same time, not enough was happening at the same time. So, I was kind of, looking through reviews afterwards to see if anyone shared the same thoughts as me, and I found Richard Brody of The New Yorker. He describes this perfectly, that the movie is a mashup of 3 movies in one. So, at once you have, the story of a middle-class blues of insufficiency or life without pleasure, basically. And then you have, a science fiction film where you have, the science part, the discovery part of downsizing. And then you have, a third movie where, the movie is documenting the process and experiencing of shrinking. So with that many storylines going on at once, I feel like some ideas were fleshed out more than others, and I do wish that they spent more time discussing the minute consequences of the actual science of downsizing and its setup, rather than, the individual story of Paul.
Okay.
Yeah. So that being said, has this movie changed any opinions that you have had, maybe prior to watching this?
I wouldn't say that it's changed any of my opinions per se, but it has definitely enhanced my opinions. I think a lot of the opinions I had about just humanity and society and the environment in itself were always there, but after watching this film, it's been intensified. With that being said, can you think of what I might be referring to within the movie that made my opinions feel intensified?
I think I know where you're going.
Okay.
Could it be the fact that, the pursuit of saving the environment is a very much individualistic pursuit? Could that be it, or?
That is one of them. It's definitely, so to start off, saving the environment. So within the film, as we first see Paul get downsized and is transported by a driver to his new McMansion, the driver says to him, right before dropping him off, thanks for saving the environment, or thanks for doing your part in saving the environment.
Yeah.
And that is something that made me think, similar to what you just said. It's just, it's not that easy. It's doing your part, obviously, it's so good, because you should do what you can, and only take control of what you can take control of and not worry about the things that you can't control. Like, that's always a good mindset. But it's not that easy, and it's not that simple. So that was a little aggravating. And to go off on the environment aspect of the movie, when the scientists first try to like show the positives and the benefits of downsizing, they brought out to the stage at the convention a single bag of garbage. Within 4 years, with 30 people, they were only, like, all the garbage could fit into one small bag, which is great, but again, that's not, like, saving, like, that's not a solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, there's just a lot of, like, oh, well, this is a problem. Instead of fixing it, let's do something else, which was...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I went on a tangent there.
Yeah, no. I 100% agree with you. I think this movie has, like, more so supported a lot of opinions that I had prior to watching, rather than, like, I guess challenging. So one of the main things, like, before I even rewatched this movie for a second time, one of the first things I thought of was a tweet.
Okay.
So I'm on Twitter a lot. So, like, and I'm also into a lot of superhero movies. So there is this one popular tweet by the account handle Cheerio Buffet, and it goes like this: teaching STEM without teaching the humanities is how you get Spider-Man villains, and teaching theater without teaching the humanities is how you get Batman villains. And in my mind, the plot of this movie reads exactly like the Spider-Man villains. Like, the scientists in this movie are taught STEM without actually teaching, like, humanities or politics. So, like, without thinking of the real life human consequences, like, such as, like, racial purity, economic self-segregation, and, like, isolation. It's just like, yeah, you're, like, creating a potential, like, you think it's a solution to a problem, but at the same time you're actually creating another problem to the actual problem itself. And, like, also, like, what I said earlier, it's, like, the idea that saving the environment as an individual and, like, altruistic choice and not, like, a governmental or, like, a larger, like, economic intervention is really problematic.
Oh, definitely. Ooh, let's...
Yeah.
Should we talk more about other problematic things that are mentioned throughout this movie?
Yeah, like, this whole idea is just, like, it just confirms that my actions alone will not stop pollution on this planet.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't change the habits of large entities. Like, there was literally another tweet I saw the other day where it says, like, ooh, like, so I don't know if you saw in the news, but there was a large pipeline in the Amazon forest in Ecuador that burst, and they were just spewing out oil into the forest.
Yeah.
And someone, like, quote tweeted this video saying, like, oh, the plastic straw that I will choose not to use later in Starbucks will definitely save the environment.
Yes. Oh, that one tweet where it was, like, which airline, I can't remember which one, but they ran, like, an empty flight for, I think it was, like, 3,000 kilometers just so that it can use up, like, or, like, not give up its spot or something, like, I can't remember what it was.
Oh my gosh,
for some reason, like, this airline had to run empty flights to do something, but, like, and, like, what is that? Like, what is the point of that? I wish oh, man, I should have saved that one.
Yeah, and, like, another opinion I had that was confirmed was, like, Paul's mother at the beginning of the film before she passed, she kind of states that, like, oh, we can shrink people to save the environment, but we cannot cure fibromyalgia. Yeah. Like, she suffers from fibromyalgia, which is why, like, Paul had to come home to take care of her. But yet, like, the scientists are out there doing these, like, experiments on people to solve a different problem. However, they're not ending the human suffering.
Yes.
It's like, shouldn't scientists be prioritizing, like having, or, like, the ability for people to be healthy and to solve, like, diseases and illnesses rather than stopping, like, or changing people to stop major polluters? I don't know.
Yeah, like, that just, like, it goes to show that in today's society, like how many people are coming up with solutions for problems that don't exist, rather than focusing on the issues and problems that do exist and do cause undue stress on the population, but like it's just ignored. Like the issues currently at play, no one cares about. Like people who want to get the recognition of, oh, I'm doing the same thing, more often than not are coming up with solutions to problems that don't even really exist, just so they can say they're doing something. But rather than supporting this, shouldn't we focus on trying to find solutions for the problems that we do already have? I think
it's like solving like the root of a problem rather than the symptom of a problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the film does a really good portrayal of this in that once again, when we are first introduced to the benefits of downsizing, like you said earlier, $1 in, I guess, real life size amount, like currency, can go a long way if you're downsized. So with that being said, ideally, like, even if you don't have a lot of money, even if you're not that well off in the real size world, if you downsize, you can become rich with the little amounts you have. But we see that that's not true in the downsized world when Ngoc Lan brings us back to where she is staying, and we see the slums of the downsized world. Like, just because a problem exists in the real world and you find a solution for it, without actually addressing the root cause, as you said, it's still going to exist and come back in one form or another.
Yeah, so, like, to me, like, all of this downsizing, this miniaturizing of people, like, this technology just feels like a gimmick for rich people. And, like, it's, like, much like the trips to space that is happening with, like, Jeff Bezos' like, Blue Origin, or, like, Richard Branson's, like, Virgin Galactica rocket ship, like, or even Elon Musk's, like, plan for a colony of humans on Mars. This also, like, plays into the idea, like, another idea that I like, came up or thought of, was, like, the ethics behind shrinking people.
Okay.
It's, like, in the case of Ngoc Lan, like, she didn't have a choice. She was shrunk because she was being controlled. She was a political prisoner. Yeah. And, like, when people use science to play God, that is a no bueno for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, I've seen so many documentaries, like, that is talking about something that's very similar to this idea of, like, using or changing the genetics of humans, which is, like, CRISPR, the technology to use to edit genes or alter DNA. It's just, like, like, why are we doing this? Why are we altering our DNA? Why are we spending so much money and time on this when, like, this could be dedicated to other, like, avenues?
Yeah, for sure. When you brought up space, that just reminds me of, like, so many scientists right now are trying to find which other planets can be habitable for humans. Yeah. But we have a habitable planet already, and we're on it. So rather than trying to find a new one, why don't we focus on saving this one and maintaining it so it stays habitable for the future?
Yeah. I know. So, that being said, if you were Paul, would you have downsized? And why?
I definitely would not have downsized. Not just because, like, I don't think that escapism is any sort of solution in any shape or form. But honestly, one thing that I just couldn't stop thinking about is, how would traveling work? Like, with our real life size bodies and abilities, traveling to, like, the other side of the planet already takes so long. So I can't imagine how much longer it would take if we were 5 inches tall.
Well, no, like, there was, like, a clip of them. Like, they were in these little boxes within a bus. And then there was one part where it's like you can send your like materials through FedEx, and then your body would just like you would just go on a plane and you just sit in like I guess a compartment. So I guess like the traveling is like the same as how you would if you were a full size human, but like you just don't actually get a seat. You're just in a box in the plane or in a box in a bus.
That was another thing that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So like the film kind of it seemed to me that like only certain people could become smaller, and with the downsized population to exist and be supported, they require real life sized people to like transport them to undergo the process, like there's just so much support that the smaller community needs from like real life size people that I think that's like another key point in the movie where it's like people don't realize the privilege that they have comes from the support and like actions from other people, and it's like it's a lot of the time it's not recognized in the sense that this movie didn't really talk about how much help and support they were getting from like the real life size people. Because if the entire Earth's population were to become smaller, it like their plans wouldn't work out because they wouldn't have that additional support that they would need to do the transporting, to do the downsizing, to just exist the way that they currently do.
Or just like the supply chain of getting materials or getting food.
Exactly.
It's like they're all produced by full-size humans.
Exactly. Yeah. Would you become downsized if you were Paul? Or if you were anyone in this film?
I guess like hindsight is already 2020, so it's like we know what happens to Paul. We know that life isn't what it seems. Honestly, I feel like maybe.
Okay.
Because, like, life wasn't really, not much was really happening for Paul. And he had close friends that were in the downsized community. And he was, like, he seems super intrigued and super smart person that, like, he really wants to do something. And, like, I think if I was in Paul's position and, like, knowing what he knew beforehand only, I think I might have gone through it. But I don't think I would have, like, jumped. I think I would talk to more people about it because I feel like they didn't really consult a lot of people. They were just like, they were like, took like 2 people to convince them like, okay, I should downsize. Like there was a moment in the film, the night before they were going to transition to the small people, they were in a bar drinking with their friends as a farewell. And there was another person in I guess just another person in the restaurant in the bar, like, drinking alcohol on the side, and he was clearly drunk, and he heard that Paul and Audrey were about to downsize, and he started, like, going on a whole rant about, like, the privilege of downsizing. Do you not understand, like, do you not understand, like, what your action is on other people, or what it has on other people, such as, like, should downsized people get the same rights as others? Like, because you're not paying the same amount of taxes, you're not like occupying the same amount of land, your spending habits are different, therefore your income tax are different. So it's like you're not contributing the same amount as a full-size human to the society, to the economic society, like, as a whole. So it's like, what happens to those, like, rights and privileges that people are provided? Like, so yeah, I think I really wish that there were more moments of that, and, like, hopefully, like, if there were more moments of that, like, it would convince Paul and Audrey that maybe downsizing wasn't a great idea. But I feel like because they weren't exposed to that many of them, I think if I was in Paul's position, I probably would have just ended up going through it as well. Yeah.
What would you do if you were Paul, and rather than finding out after the procedure that your wife has abandoned the idea, you find out before? Like, would you think that you would still want to transition, or would you hold back and say, hey, if my wife is questioning it, maybe I should too?
I think I would hold back as well.
Okay.
Because, like, it seems like after Paul, like, his mom had passed, like, he doesn't have a lot of friends and family. He doesn't have a large community. Audrey is his family. Audrey's parents are his only family. So I think if Audrey didn't do it and she told him beforehand, before, like, he shrunk, then, like, I think if I were Paul, I would have also not continued the process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So now let's get into more specific questions we have about the film.
Okay.
Hayley, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you know where the movie is filmed?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I am surprised by that answer. So, before I kind of, like, tell you where.
Okay.
So, another major perk of living in Toronto is that a lot of film and television series are filmed here. And like, one of the many reasons why there's a lot of, like, numerous productions here is that thanks to a lot of, like, tax breaks, there's lower costs and more diverse landscape. Toronto is kind of known as Hollywood North. And since I had very little, like, recollection of, like, the film itself, it was a genuine delight. Not even 3 minutes into the film, I see the Aga Khan Museum appear, dubbing as Istanbul.
Oh.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
No, I don't know. Have you ever been to the Aga Khan Museum?
No, but I've definitely driven past it a few times, and I know exactly where it is. I feel like it's just something I should have known, but I did not.
Yeah, so it's actually, like, because it's like it's a very beautiful museum. It's like a white stone walls, and there's a reflecting pond. It's a very iconic spot for people to take photos in Toronto.
Yeah.
So, like, in addition to, like, I actually having seen the building for in person myself and all these photos, like, I immediately knew, I was like, oh my gosh, that's Toronto. They just, like, CGI'd some, like, landscape and, like, skyscrapers in the background. I was like, this is weird. But, yeah, there's a bunch of, like, other fun cameos. I don't know if you recall, like, the Anarcha Center is actually in it, and it's used as the place or the exhibition center where Paul and Andrea learn about, like, downsizing, all the benefits, all the features, and, like, talking to the salesperson. They're in, like, the lobby of the Anarcha Center at Exhibition Place.
Oh, okay. You know what? That did look familiar.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, maybe all convention centers look the same, so I didn't really think much of it. But I was like, man, that looks really familiar.
I recognize that because a lot of TV shows use that as, like, an airport.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, they set it as an airport. Like, in Suits, they use that as an airport. And there was another movie recently, but I forget what it's called. And another, like, cameo is York University. There is a building or this famous, like, area called the Rotunda, and it was used as, like, the lobby that Paul had entered once he completed the miniaturization process.
Paul had entered. So this is where, like, he sees all the cars.
Yeah, so this is when he's, like, small and he gets dressed and he's in this building and he meets the man that takes him to his house. And, like, he's in, like, a circular room or circular lobby area, and that's, like, York University.
Oh, wow. You know
and
what?
Then there's,
like, all of these things, all of these places did look familiar.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was, like, mimicking what a lot of other films may have used in the past, and that's why it might look familiar. Yeah. But maybe it's because I've actually seen these places in person that they look familiar.
Yeah, and then the last, like, fun cameo is actually very, very discreet. Like, I didn't know until, like, I was searching for, like, downsizing Toronto film locations. But Burrock Secondary School.
No way.
Yeah, so Burrock Secondary School is a school that's in the city that we're originally from. And they used that school as the school for the high school reunion. So the gym scene, the indoor gym scene, like, where his two, like, downsized friends come in, that gym is the cafeteria of Burrock.
Really?
Yeah, and, like, I've been into that cafeteria several times for, like, volleyball tournaments, so I was like, oh, that does make sense.
Wow. Now
But
I have to rewatch it, knowing all of these things.
Yeah, I know. I take a lot of enjoyment from filming, like, as, like, picking out, like, spots in Toronto in the film.
Yeah.
This takes me to a secondary point that I have, and is that, like, Toronto a lot of times is posing as other cities like New York or Chicago in film. So, like, since it's so easy for Toronto to stand in for other cities, like, what do you think that says about the identity and the architecture in and of Toronto?
I think that says that the architecture and landscape in Toronto is not as unique as we may think it is.
Yeah.
And is very similar to any other big city around the world because it can very easily be used in place of other major cities around the world.
Yeah,
or at least in North America.
Yeah, so like Toronto architecture is quite generic. And like this is actually a larger discussion as a whole in the architecture community. And like there was actually an exhibit that was conducted last year at the Venice Biennale, which is a festival that celebrates art, architecture, cinema, dance, music, theater, and contemporary arts around the world. And like each country is given sort of like its own pavilion to produce something that says something about their country and like about the art in their country. And for the architecture exhibit last year, our pavilion was a showcase that talked about Canada and examined its city's ability to stand in for television and film locations.
Wow.
Yeah, so like to showcase the work, the Canadian Pavilion is constructed. They constructed an angular I guess facade with glass, steel, and brick structure designed by a firm in Milan, and in effect, like this like brick facade became a giant green screen and transformed via a smartphone app into like a shifting array of Canadian backdrops or buildings. And this attention-grabbing installation is a part of Imposter Cities, the country's contribution to the Biennale, and commissioned by the Canada Council for the Arts. And like they also, like what you just said, like basically found the same thing, whereas like Canadian cities are quite generic in design, particularly they resemble a lot of cities in the United States, which Canada plays most often. And when interviewing the lead of the exhibit, he said that like the reason for this is because like everything in Canada goes through a design review board. If you're in Toronto, you are very familiar with this because every building does not get built without the approval of city councils, with planners, of a bunch of array of people. And so because there is like the design of cities are done by committee, there is rather a conservative approach to things. And this is very like effective of keeping out like really bad projects or bad designs, but at the same time it really limits what good design or noticeable design can be. So it's like it's basically saying that like majority of Canadian architects and cities shy away from like radical experimentation. So we don't have interesting architecture. We don't have like diverse in design or diverse in like material palettes, which is quite sad as an architect. Like you want to do something that is like not boring.
Yeah. Like a little more unique.
Yeah, exactly. And like although the main takeaway from their exhibition is not to answer whether or not like being an imposter city is good or bad. They do hope like by raising these questions about the way architecture experience in the digital age, it also like talks about how they hope that like architecture identities are formed, and they hope that people think about like what the difference between a real and fake like building means and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like my main takeaway from this is like I do really think this conversation is like very necessary into what Canadian architecture is, like what it is, how do you describe it, like who belongs part of this discussion or who belongs in like this category. And I think it's important to have it with people that are outside of like Canadian architecture, because like when you're inside like this bubble, you might not realize like you're in a bubble. So it's nice to get like a perspective from someone else saying like, oh, maybe this could be Canadian architecture, or like maybe this, maybe you should be doing this to be Canadian architecture, or what they might think Canadian architecture is. Yeah.
Wow. You know what? That
Uh-huh.
is a very interesting viewpoint. Like, I'm really glad that you were able to pick up on, like, where the movie was filmed. Because honestly, going into watching this movie, preparing for this episode, I had a tough time thinking about how we can relate this movie back into architecture and urban planning.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
thinking, you know what? Maybe it's more going to be about solutions that we can come up with as architects and as urban planners to
Yeah.
mitigate the problems that we're currently facing rather than coming up with a new world to live in. But that was a very interesting insight. And honestly, like, I just learned a lot.
I was like thinking about something else about like the design of the downsized community itself.
Okay.
And I feel like I don't know if you noticed, but like the ideal lifestyle that they were promoting in Leisureland or like the community that's small in general were quite like monoculture. It was like a monoculture of suburbia where like everyone lives in their individual homes, they have their individual plot of land to do things.
Yeah.
And it kind of reflects what was like shown previously in the full-size world where like everyone lives in their own little bubbles, they're not happy, they don't make enough to like buy a bigger house and buy bigger land, which is why they downsize to get that bigger house, bigger land. So I feel like maybe one of the problems is just that you're not creating like livable cities. You're not creating like cities where everyone can walk everywhere. There's a diverse like variety of activities within a neighborhood or within a block because like everybody's living just amongst houses. You can't walk to a grocery store. You can't just walk to like a restaurant. Like everything you do is so spaced out apart that like you don't really have any leisure in your life because every aspect of your life is separated into these little distinct bubbles. Like you have, I live here in one area of the city, and then I work in one area in the city, and if I want to enjoy my life, I have to go to a different area. It makes it difficult to like go to like the social aspect of your life because it's not nearby everything else.
Everything is so separate.
Yeah. It's like everything is sprawled out and like divided by activity. So maybe if like in the actual full-size world, like rather than thinking of like, oh, to get a better life, to live a happier life, I need to like live in a bigger house so I can provide those activities for myself. Maybe it's like architects and planners can create actually like walkable livable cities, like 15-minute cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too. I just thought like a good way to go about finding a better or like just making the current world more appealing is to just find that sense of community and just make it a more pleasant place to be for everyone.
Yeah. And like it doesn't have to involve like having more money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and like another thing that I found kind of funny is that when Paul meets his neighbor Doosan, because Doosan was holding like a massive party. It was super loud, and Paul was like, "You need to be quiet." Doosan brought a point saying like, "I'm only having this party or hosting this party because this Leisureland is so boring because everything closes at 10 p.m." So, in addition to maybe having a diverse activity within a certain block, you could also have, like, activities for different times of the day. It's like, everything 15-minute cities is about will benefit the people in the full-size world of downsizing. And, like, they won't have to downsize to be able to live a more luxurious and leisurely life because a 15-minute city can provide that for them in the real world.
Yeah, that's true. So now that we've covered like the plot and we've discussed our opinions on the plot of the movie, what are your opinions of the actual film itself?
Okay, so I think the plot is I feel like there's a lot going on at the plot. There's a lot of good things happening, as in, like, they're trying to tell a big story with a big idea. However, not everything is fleshed out. And considering that it's pretty creative, I think the plot gets an 8. The cinematography gets a 7. The set design
Okay.
gets definitely an 8 because it was pretty interesting to see them superimpose a small person next to a big person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think structure and pacing of the whole movie, like a 7.5, because like there were the transitions between those like different parts of Paul's life. It's like kind of abrupt. They just put like 5 years later, 10 years later. It's like I understand they're doing that because like there's already a long runtime for the film, and then they were trying to get everything out as much as they could without cutting too much.
Yeah.
So overall, I think the movie gets a 7.6. What about you?
Yeah, okay. So I think the plot, like if it was a regular movie, I think it's really stupid. Like I think it's
Oh, yeah.
like what on earth are they talking about? But knowing that it was written as a satirical film, it definitely scores much higher. I think like honestly an 8, because there's so many reviews that I've read after watching the movie that honestly I think the viewers of the movie, they totally missed the point of the satire behind it. So many people commented like, why did the second half of the film have nothing to do with them being small? That could have played out with the characters being like life-sized. But to me, that was the point of the movie. Like they tried to become small to avoid these problems that exist in the real world. But the satire behind it is that no matter what size you are, these problems are still going to exist. And I think it was so well delivered. And just so many things like that throughout the movie. Like, it was just delivered so well that it made me think, wow, these characters are so stupid. Like, why are they not thinking about it this way? But honestly, like, that's the point of satire. So with what it is, I think it deserves an 8. Like, it was truly really good, in my opinion. The cinematography, it was okay. I think, like, it just, there wasn't a lot to it. Like, there wasn't really anything too special in my eyes. So I would say maybe, like, a 6. Yeah, like, just nothing outstanding. So, like, it wasn't bad by any means. But it was just, like, nothing outstanding.
Yeah, like, their CGI backgrounds could be a little bit crisper.
The set design, it was pretty good. I don't know, it was pretty good. I think maybe like a 7. The structure and pacing of the movie, I think that could have been done a lot better because it was a very long movie. It was 2 hours long. And for what it was, I think there was a lot of fluff. But again, with what the movie was trying to portray, I can't really see it being any shorter. But being able to convey the same messages. So, like, I get it. So maybe like a 6.5 there.
Okay, tough critic.
I know. But, like, I do think, like, the moral of the film is really good. Like, I think it raises a lot of issues that we should be questioning as a society. But you have to go into watching it knowing it's a satire, and they're not. Like, they don't really mean the things that they're talking about. Like, it's not... Like, if you miss that point, then you're not gonna like it.
So, yeah, basically, don't believe everything you watch in the film. Question everything you watch in the film. And then you'll love it. Yeah.
So with that being said, downsizing is probably not the plan for now, but recommending watching it is. Listen to our next episode to continue figuring it out with us.
Thanks for following along to this episode. If you liked it, please give us a like, review, and subscribe for more. Until then, follow us on Instagram at What's the Plan Podcast for what the next plan is.